Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working on the Module 3 lab here this evening. We will also do the assignment, and we're going to take these one at a time and try to make sure that we address all the issues in here. As I've been doing with all of these, I do like to fully read through the instruction set so we have a clear picture of where we're going. And then we'll take a look at the sample program run, and then we'll try to build it ourselves. All right, so here's the Module 3 lab. It says, you've been asked to write a program for a travel website to help users determine which international cell phone package they should purchase. There are three packages: the Big Day Pass, the Tourist Pass, and the Adventurer Pass. The Big Day Pass is $10 per day with unlimited minutes. The Tourist Pass is 20 cents per minute. The Adventurer Pass is $3 per day and 10 cents per minute. The program should ask the user how many days they will be traveling and how many minutes per day they expect to use their phone. The output should include the cost for each plan and a recommendation for the least expensive plan based on their usage. Format all currency to 2 decimal places. Right. Program should use at least one local function effectively. So we're gonna have to figure out which that's going to be, but we'll determine that as we're coding. Here's a sample program run. So after your program runs, the console should look like the following example. Exact output will vary, but basically you're going to prompt and say, how many days will you be traveling? How many minutes per day will you be using your phone? Assuming to talk, right? That's aside from like Facebook and Instagram and etc. And then it would do this output. So it would tell you what the costs would be relative to your usage. And then whichever one is the least expensive is probably the one you should go for. Right. So this is not an unusual scenario, actually, if any of you have ever traveled, and it can be as simple as like traveling out of state, to cause cell phone problems, but especially if you like travel somewhere like Europe, right? It's like, do I take my phone to Europe? Will it even work? That kind of thing. But even if you travel around the country, it behooves you to talk to your cellular provider and to make sure that you have like good coverage in places where you're going. I discovered many years ago that my plan around here didn't work so great when I like crossed the Mississippi River pretty much heading west, and then all of a sudden it was like I had like no coverage, everything was roaming and yada yada yada, and then I changed my plan. This is an issue that a lot of people do have when they travel, though, and especially when you get to Europe, then what a lot of people end up doing is they buy disposable phones. It's kind of the thinking. All right, so let's go ahead and bring up Visual Studio and let's get ready to code. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project here. It is going to be a C# console app. We should probably name it appropriately, but let's find the right folder first. So I'm not putting it in my repos. This one's going on my regular C drive documents for this class for this semester. So I'm selecting this folder, and then I'm going to name this Mod 3 Lab. All right, let's make it real simple. Solution and project in the same directory is fine. Both of these boxes are staying unchecked. I'm sticking with the latest .NET 8 long-term support version. All right, let's let it build out the project. And now what I'm doing here is I'm looking at my old solutions to see how I did it, right? So there's a couple different thoughts I'm having here in my head as to how to proceed with this code. All right, so I think I'm going to go with the same approach I used last year. I think it seemed like a pretty concise solution without too much code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just removing the stuff here at the top. I'm going to just throw in some comments though, and you might want to do this. Module 3 lab. I might add a blank line. You want to put your, name here or whatever. That's up to you. Right. Couple things that I'm going to think about here is what are the basic actions that are happening in this program? This is kind of what I'm thinking about. And the first part of this is I'm going to prompt a user. I'm going to ask them two questions and gather two pieces of information, which is basically how many days they're traveling and how many minutes per day they plan on using their phone, right? And then that information needs to get stored somewhere. And I'm going to start by declaring the variables for that. That's where I'm going to start. Is like, what data do I need? It's kind of like the ingredients for a recipe. And so I think the number of days that a person is traveling, that could be a counting number, so an integer. And I think the number of minutes would fall into the same category. So I'm going to go ahead and declare two ints. One is going to be days and one is going to be minutes. And I'm just declaring them right up here at the top. Now, currently they're unused, so they're underlining green, right? That's kind of like Visual Studio's way of saying, hey, you're not using this, you're wasting memory, right? So heed those, especially if you end up not using them. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is we are also going to have variables that will make a determination on which one of the pass levels is the most affordable, meaning those are going to be calculated and stored. And so I'm going back to the expected output, and those are all monetary amounts, right? So I'm thinking probably doubles, right? Is where my brain goes for it. And then you know what? I'm also thinking that this might be helpful to copy this little bit of information over to my program, at least for a moment. And I know you guys are like, what the heck is he doing? Yeah, I'm basically I'm doing this. I'm just pasting in that information just so I can have it here. And then I'm gonna like take this info and tweak it. And then because these are calculated things, right? So there's like a cost per day and then a cost per minute. Cost per day and cost per minute. Well, you're not seeing the day here, but there's a minute cost. And then here you got both, right? So both of these have a day cost and minute cost. Whether they're actually happening or not is a different thing. But that's going to be calculated by the number of days and the number of minutes they expect to talk per day, right? That's like a function of math. And so we're going to calculate what each pass will cost and then store it. So I'm going to create three double variables because they're going to hold money basically. And one's going to be the big day pass. Then I'm also going to have the tourist pass and the adventurer. I can even say that adventurer pass like that. All right, so those are my data pieces that I need, my ingredients for my recipe or program. All right. I'm still going to leave this info here just for referral's sake, but now I'm thinking of the fact that the goal of this module mostly is to learn about functions and moving values around in your program. We already know that we're operating inside the main method, so we don't have to create a main method and call it or anything like that. But up here at the top of my program, what I often like to do is put all my function calls that actually steer the program to operate up here at the top. So this will be kind of like a call to all the functions in a way that makes sense for the program to operate. Okay, so for example, and I'm going to be kind of weird about this, is I'm seeing it as this, right? One action is we're prompting the user for the info, right? So I could write a function that just prompts the user. Then once we have that info, now I can do my calculations. That could be a different function. So that function would calculate the values for all three passes, right? And store them. Then the other action is we're going to have to take that choice and show it to the user, right? Like what are the outputs so that you can make the correct determination, right? You want to show them all the info and then um, make a determination based upon the info. So here's how my brain is going to think on it, right? And I'm thinking that I'm going to create one function first called get user input. And I'm calling it. I know I don't have it created yet, so it's underlining red. It's yelling at me, basically. It's like, what the heck are you doing? Right. And I know my camel casing is broken there. There we go. Right, so the first task will be to get the user input. Then we're gonna calculate which, or we're gonna calculate the pass costs. Like we're gonna take those numbers and we're gonna do the calculations. Then we're going to determine the choice, and I could call it that, but um, I think we're just basically going to choose a pass. So I'm going to call it pass choice. And all of these will be functions that will perform those actions, right? So you see, like, one of the advantages here is like I'm starting from the higher level. What are my basic tasks? Breaking it down into logical subcategories, and then I'm going to code each one of these out one at a time, right? But that's basically the whole program right there. And notice really what it is input, processing, and output, by the way, right? And so if you wanted to add that here, you could, do that input, and you know what, this isn't really like exactly true because I'm probably gonna do some output here. And then for this one, I'm also actually gonna decide, or really we'll say select the best answer and display it, right? So there's some logic that happens here. So it's roughly input, processing, output, but there's other stuff kind of intermingled. Okay, that's kind of my approach here. All right, so now that I have these all highlighting, um, what the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to like comment out the ones that I'm not building right now, so that I don't have the underlines. So I'm going to focus on that, just that first function. At this point, I'm not worried about this data. I will still look at it, but I'm moving it down just to get it out of the way. So I'm going to build this function, and I got to think about this. The function's going to be called get user input. I already determined the name. And then I need to figure out, is it returning a value or not? Okay, so here's kind of like weird thoughts on this stuff. I could run get user input here and have it return a value and have it store a value. But then I remember back to our lecture, and this is kind of one of the challenges you run into. The user is going to be inputting two pieces of information, and then a return statement would have to send both of those back, or the return statement can't. So here's the weird part, right? If you remember like what we said in the lecture, a return statement can only return one value. So I can't return two. So I'm not going to send the values back and forth. And this is one of the reasons why I declared them as global variables up here. So the function will have its own block of code. I can't access the variables inside the function, but the function can access the variables inside the program. And so I can leave those variables at the global level and set them inside the function. That would work just fine, right? So the function, in other words, doesn't need to return anything at all. All right, so I'll put a little label here and say local functions below. All right, so the first one will be void. It's not going to return anything. It's going to be called get user input. Get user input, parentheses, curly brackets, and there we are. All right. I've already determined in my head I don't need to send anything to this, nor do I expect anything back. So now I just need to prompt the user. All right, this part should be pretty easy. All right, so let's start with the console right, we're going to match what's shown in the sample program run. How many days will you be traveling? All right. We're going to store that in the variable called days. We will convert it to an int and do a read line. So try to take this at a kind of calm pace here. We're in no hurry here tonight. It takes a second to type it in. Then we'll do the second prompt, which is how many minutes per day will you be using your phone? Once again, we will capture that, convert it to an int after we read that line in from the prompt. So now, once again, notice that days and minutes technically are in scope with each other, right? So because this is set at the global level, this function can access it. If these variables were inside a different block of code, curly brackets basically, whether it's named or not or whatever, it would be inaccessible, right? It would be out of scope. I can come out of a function and find something globally. I can't go the other direction now.
Question for you. This is sort of related but unrelated. Can you have two codes open in Visual Studios at the same time?
Two programs?
Yeah. Because I'm
Yeah,
trying to
well,
look at my program I used just to compare.
I commented out I wrote the
I
whole
just
lab and I
commented.
just put it in a big comment and then I'm rewriting it.
yeah,
Okay.
you know what? Those are all valid approaches. But yeah, see, this is one of the problems. What I would suggest that you do though is if you're looking at like one thing that you've done already,
Uh-huh.
and instead of doing it inside the same product, because when it's part of a solution or part of a
Right.
project, you're kind of intermingling two projects then, and it kind of creates a confusion. So what I do is I'll just bring up a different editor. So for example, I have my Notepad++ here where I
Okay.
have my solution, right? So, or if this is my old work and this is what I'm using as my guide. So you can see I've made the variables already. This is my last year's version. And I just did get user input, right? So we got that far. But I'm not loading it up in Visual Studio because if I did, then I would have two instances of it running. And I certainly don't want to open up the files in the same project.
Okay.
And Anthony, it's not that it's not doable.
Mhm.
If you have two files open in the same IDE, both with the same name, it becomes really easy to confuse them.
Right,
That's
right, right.
yeah, that's the one tip I'll give, right? So if you want like a secondary tool to open up your code in, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could just use regular Notepad for that matter, or you can use Visual Studio Code,
That's what I'm
or
using now. I just opened up
yeah,
my code that I was using earlier because you want us to practice to view what I did and comparing it to yours. So that's what I just did. Okay, I
okay,
just wanted to know
fantastic.
because I was like, dang, I can never open two codes in here, and I'm like, I just want to compare. Sorry to interrupt, but sorry.
Oh no, it's quite all right. But so this is pretty easy to get back on track here. We wrote our first function, right? And you notice that the approach that I basically used. Then the next part is basically to do the calculations, like multiply those numbers through and come up with values. I'm going to uncomment this function call. And this is really kind of weird because this is not where your brain would normally go, right? So if we have an error like this one, and notice I'm hovering over the error with my mouse, the thing little box comes up and tells me what the error message is, and it says the name CalcPass does not exist in the current context, meaning it can't find it anywhere in the program, right? Because I haven't created it yet. And here's the beauty of Visual Studio, by the way. I can look at the potential fixes, so it like recommends potential fixes. And I want you to notice, for example, it could generate a method for me, or create an object, which is kind of weird because we haven't learned that yet, so that's not right. or we can generate the method. Notice the interchangeable terminology here, because we learned that a method is a function inside of a program, and that's what we're creating technically. For us, it's a function, but for the outside world, it's a method. So I could actually use that to create the code for me. Isn't that like a wild approach? Right? That probably feels very uncomfortable, right? It's like, wait a second, it just wrote a function for me. Yeah, it just wrote a function for us. Sometimes those auto fixes are correct, and sometimes you're wise to take them, real frankly. Now, what I'm going to do is I do not like where it put it. So here, let me control Z that. So I'm going to take this function and I'm going to cut it and I'm going to move it down here below my other function. And okay, let's control Z that. I messed something up here. Cut and paste. There we go. Now this is throwing a piece of code inside here. So basically what this little thing is that they're throwing in here is this is building the function without it doing anything. And they throw in this code so it doesn't keep the program from running. If I would exclude that, then I have a problem. I don't know if you noticed that, you're right. Like I have a warning now because of that. So this is automatically generated by Visual Studio so that you can have it in your program. You can run the program. It won't crash the program, but really you should replace this with your own code, which I'm about to do, by the way. Back up here, I'm going to tighten up my code, right? I still want this to steer my program. So now I'm writing calc pass. Notice the underline is gone. And now I'm going to blow away this code. So now we know what we basically have to do here is we have to take the numbers that were input and do the math. And then we're using this goofy little guide, right? So the big day pass is $10 per day and no calculation for minutes. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these variables that I created up here, like the big day pass, and I'm just going to assign them values here. Do I need to send values in here? The answer to this is no, because they exist on the global level again. So I can just draw them right from the global level. I don't have to do anything weird. All right, now we're going to do our math. What Visual Studio is suggesting is completely wrong. That's not at all what we're doing. We're going to take the number of days and we're going to multiply it by 10 or $10 per day, right? There's no calculation for minutes, so that calculation is over. That's all there is to it. Then we have the tourist pass, and it's auto suggesting. I'm going to let it type that in, but now I'm going to look down here and go, no, that's 20 cents per minute. So really what I want here is minutes times 0.2, so 0.2. All right. The adventurer pass is $3 per day and $10 per minute. So let's copy the name. Oops. That was
I have a
weird.
question.
Sure.
So it says minutes per day. So if you enter like 10 minutes and you're going for 5 days, wouldn't that total 50 minutes?
That would be the thought.
Does this, because it's just minutes times, um, does it take into account like the total minutes or just the minutes that they put in? So like if they entered 10, would it be 10 times 0.2 or would it, does that make sense?
Yeah, right. Well, if they think they're going to be talking on the phone 10 minutes a day, that would be 10 times 0.2. So that would cost them $2.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Um,
I'm not sure what the confusion is really.
oh, well, I'll figure it out. I'm not sure if I'm wording it correctly.
All right. Well, with this calculation that we're doing next here, I do have to, we have to still figure out the days. So we're going to days times 3, right? That was the $3 per day. And then we also are going to have the minutes calculation, which is minutes times 10 cents. Yeah, 10 cents a minute for the third option. And if you want to, you want to add zeros to make your brain feel better about this, because those are all money amounts. You could do that, right? It'll cast just fine. You don't have to, but you might choose to do that. I'm just saying.
I did mine a
No.
little bit different.
Okay. And can I just also point out here, are the orders of operations valid here for this last equation? Would that work out okay? It would. It would. This would work out correctly. Right. Because the thing about how all of these work. So if I get a big day pass, if I said like, hey, I'm talking like 500 minutes a day, that's not even a thing, but $10 per day is probably a good deal. If I don't talk a lot and I don't pay by the day, I just pay by the minute, this probably is the best deal, right? If I might talk a bit, but I'm not sure how much, right? Then this one might be good. So these are the calculations we're going to do, but you have to think about like the fact that they're telling you the number of days, which is going to multiply by a dollar amount. Not all of them do that, just two of them. And then only two of them calculate the minutes. One of them calculates both.
Unless I'm mistaken, shouldn't both the tourist pass and adventure pass for the minutes also be multiplied by the day count? Because the minutes is just minutes per day. So like like
Okay.
if you have 60 minutes per day and you
That's what I
travel
was
for
like
3 days, it's 180.
getting.
Okay. All right. So you guys are like stealing my thunder here a little bit, but yeah. All right. So you have it exactly correct. So then how do we add that in? If I'm gonna multiply, so for example, wherever I'm doing minutes, I also have to factor it by days. All right. So this is the good problem solving you guys are doing. If that's the case, how about now with PEMDAS? Do I need to put parentheses against anything?
Probably so, because since you have 2 days, once you have to put parentheses between days times three, and
Yeah. If it makes you feel better, yeah, you can do this. But I will tell you that because we're multiplying, oops, like for example here, the way this equation would process would be this would calculate this without the parentheses. This would process, then this would process, then this would process, then it would add them together. You don't need the parentheses technically. Makes you feel better to have them. Put them in. All right. So we have then I think what we need to do are calculations. Is there anything else we need to do in our calculations? How about, okay, so one thing that I recall from this, right, is we're doing the calculations. Maybe we should tell them what the calculations say, and then we can run the code to determine the output. So I'm actually going to code these output statements into this function. This is what makes sense to me. I did the math. Now I'm going to display, and I'm going to be careful about how I label this. So like maybe I'll go like this. I'll say, do the math, right? This is the processing part. Then I will display initial calculations. That's a good way to say it. No decision. We're just putting the information back up on the screen, right? Like you're buying a product at the store and the product is detailed on your receipt. Basically, is kind of my thinking here. So for each one of these, then I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to use string interpolation. I'm going to drop my variable in, and I'm using the C to format it as currency. Okay, so that's the one all of these are basically just repeats of each other, right? If you got the first one, you have the others, right? We'll do the math, display the calculations. I'm doing a Control S to save. All right. I think at this point, we're safe to try running it to see if at least this part is working. I would also argue that you should probably test all your calculations. I'm not super worried about that, but you probably should. So let's do a run. Here comes the run. I'll try to move the console out of the way as much as I can. How many days will you be traveling? I'm just going to put in, I don't know, 2. How many minutes per day will you use your phone? I don't know, 23. Right. And then it says big day pass would cost 20, tourist pass would cost 920, and adventurer pass would cost 1060. Okay. Now we just needed to make the decision. So that's going to be the last function. So now we're going to build this one, which is which pass are we choosing, basically. I'm going to copy that name, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to create another function. So once again, this will be a void function. We're not moving anything around quite yet. I'm going to paste in the name and put in a set of curly brackets. And then ultimately, what message are we really putting on the screen here? We're just going to say, you should purchase, right? And then we'll do our if statements or whatever statements we're doing to output the rest of this. But the first part of it, I could console right line that. So I'm going to just, and I'm not going to right line it. I'm just going to console right to leave it on the same line. And then I'll complete the text afterwards. Well, that was interesting. I thought I copied it. Not in the buffer. There we go. All right. You should purchase the, right? And this is a right, not a right line. So the cursor is going to wait to type in the rest. Now we have to do the questions, right? So we're going to pick one and then redisplay its cost. Okay. So if we were going to pick the cheapest one, so this is kind of like, pick the smallest number kind of scenario, right? So how do we figure out which one of the 3 is the smallest? Well, we compare them with each other, basically. So I'm just going to write an if statement. Here's the if, here's the parens, and I'm just going to start with, if the big day pass is less than the tourist pass, and the big day pass is less than the adventurer pass, then we're going to do some output, right? So, and what are we going to output? Well, I would output this. I'm trying to get those extra curly brackets out of there. And boy, that is quite, is that broken? No, it's not broken. It's just messy looking. All right, Control Z. There we go. See what it's doing to my, it's like moving my curly bracket up. All right, whatever. I'll leave it like that. Not sure why it's doing that. Normally it puts it here, right? So that's the one scenario. And then now it's just a process of elimination. Now we can just say else if the tourist pass is the cheapest one, right? Parentheses, sorry. Tourist pass is less than the big day pass, and the tourist pass is less than the adventurer pass, then we'll console right line this. Right, that one's the cheapest. And otherwise, we don't have to do a check. The other one's the right choice, correct? And we'll just console right line it and be done. And I think it's interesting how it's being weird with its curly brackets, but I'm going to do it like this, right? And we got my if, else if, else. Got my semicolon there. What am I missing? Oh, I need one more curly bracket to close the function. I must have deleted it. There we go. Yep. I don't need this information anymore, so I'm just going to delete that. And there it is. That's the last function, folks. All right. Doing a control S to save. I'm going to give it a trial run here. I'm going to try to use the same values that were given in the example. So it's like 5 and 60. So 5 days traveling, 60 minutes a day. Talking a lot, right? Are we getting the same results? And it looks like we are. Exactly. Right. I see some issues with the output. We should probably get some blank lines in there. But if you get it to work like this and the logic's working correctly, then yeah, this is what we go for. Play with the numbers a little bit, you know, and think about it. All right. Let's call this the solution then for the Module 3 lab. All right, we're back from break and we're going to move now into the Module 3 assignment. Once again, I'm going to do a read through on this so we have a basis for proceeding. And it goes kind of like this. You've been asked to write a program for the health and wellness department of your company. Your company has a point system that rewards healthful behaviors with Amazon gift cards based upon monthly points earned. Points are earned for the following activities: steps. So more than 10,000 a day gives you 5 points per day achieved. Yoga, 6 to 11 classes per month are 10 points. Yoga 12 or more are 30. Aerobics 6 to 11 are 20. 12 or more are 50. Nutrition 1 to 3 weekly nutrition meetings is 10 points. All 4 weekly nutrition meetings gives you 40. Okay, so that's the chart they use. 1 card is rewarded for every 50 points each month. Points reset at the beginning of the month. The program asks a user to enter for the current month the following information: number of days, number of yoga classes, number of aerobics classes, and the number of weekly nutrition meetings attended. The output should be the monthly points and how many Amazon gift cards were earned. Okay, so the requirements say this program should include 4 local functions: a function to accept the number of days with at least 10,000 steps and return the total points, a local function to accept the number of yoga classes and return the total points, a local function to accept the number of aerobics classes and return the total points, and another one for the number of meetings, and once again, returning the total points. But notice, all of these are calling for a return statement, all 4 functions, right? So we're told to include 4 functions, and that's exactly what we're going to do. The program should use 4 local functions to calculate the grand total of points and then output the total awarded gift cards. All right. They don't have a sample screen on this, which I think is a little weird. I don't remember it being like that last time. But these will be our prompts, right? For sure. And then we will have the 4 functions. And we just have to basically orchestrate it now. And the fact that we've done one program already with some functions, and you kind of saw the approach I used. We can mimic some of those approaches here. And we are going to now basically write functions for all the different things that we're going to do here. So they're only asking, by the way, for the local functions that will basically get the number that they've typed in, does the calculation, and then returns the total points, right? And there's a lot of different ways to read this, right? So the one thing that catches my eye right off the bat, right? This one should be easy. Like if they do like more than 10,000 steps, they just get their points, right? But when you get to yoga and aerobics and nutrition, they have like these parameters. So it's kind of like, and listen to how I say this, of course, if they take 6 to 11 yoga classes, they get 10 points. If they take 12 or more yoga classes, they get 30 points. But there's also the, 5 or less than 6 area too, right? That we're not even talking about. So when I try to do, let's say this first, or this one here with the yoga classes, I kind of have to have an if statement here to help me calculate it, right? I don't want to have to do separate statements for each, or separate functions for each various versions, right? All right. And so I'm gonna like kind of steer this in a couple of different ways. I do want to write local functions that do exactly what this says, but there's many different ways to approach this, you guys, and some of it is a matter of how you think about the problem. The one thing that I know for sure is that we are going to be calculating points. And so let's kind of start maybe with that piece. I still have my previous thing open, so I'm going to close this solution file. I am going to create a new project, console app. I am going to be using this folder here for the fall of 2024. And I think I'm just going to call this mod 3 assignment. All right, and we're going to go to the next screen here, leaving all those unchecked, and we are creating. Right, program is created. I'm going to go ahead and just add a little thing here at the top just to tell me that it's the module 3 assignment. And if you want to give it a name, give it a name. That's on you. Let's think though about what we're being asked to determine here, right? So what I'm looking at, and this is how my mind is conceiving it, that ultimately we're calculating points and the number of cards. Those are the two real big factors that we're calculating. And then the number of points will help to determine the number of cards. And then every time we get information from the user relative to a certain activity, we can capture that information, calculate how many points that gives us, and add it to the point total. And then at the end, we can make the determination, what the output is, right? So where am I going to start? I'm going to start with the data, basically. So I'm going to think here about like what I need to store. And I think I'm going to need to store points, and I'm going to preset this to 0, right? I'm going to have a starting point for it. And then I think I need another integer for the number of gift cards. I'm just going to call it cards, by the way. Also presetting that to 0. Once again, we're going to like be basically pulling back information via a combination of methods, right? We're going to prompt, and then based on the prompt result, do a determination to determine the points. And the way, basically what I'm trying to point out here is the way I think it makes sense to proceed is that when I prompt the user, I could do that inside the local function, make the determination and return the points all at once. I could prompt, grab the value, calculate, and return it all in one thing. See where I'm going with that? Right. So when I call a function to get the number of days, right? That's what I'm going to call the first one, I think. Okay, so all right, so this is a roadmap in my brain that I'm going to execute here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to call get, well, I'm not going to say number of days. I'm just going to say get days, I think is a good thing to call that. So that's a function I want to create and call. That function, and I'm really not following good naming convention here, it should be a capital G, right? That function is going to return a value. And here's a big takeaway. What value is it going to return? And according to the instructions, it's going to return the total points awarded from that activity. And so I need a place to put that. Well, you know what? I already created a variable called points, right? And so I can just run the function. It'll return the value and put it in points. But I don't want it just to go in points. I want it added to points. So if there's already something in there, I'm going to add it in. Right. And so each one of my functions will basically prompt the user. Now, this function does not exist, right? And I'm going to see if I can invoke the IntelliSense here. And I'm just going to let it generate the method days. And I want you to notice it's already predetermining the return type because there's a variable here waiting to accept it, which happens to be an integer. So it already determined that it should return an integer. Isn't that slick? Yes, very much so. Be impressed. Thank you, Visual Studio. Do I need to send any information in here? No, because I'm going to get the information from the function, calculate it, and send back the points. I really don't need to send anything in this case. I'm just going to do a really simple console write line. Or write, actually, it's a prompt, so it's just a write. Enter the number of days that 10,000 steps were exceeded. Okay, so they're going to type in a day amount. And then we're going to send this back. Okay, so what's the calculation for determining the number of points for this? 5 points per day achieved. So we're going to do what? We're going to multiply whatever they type in times 5, correct? Yeah. So first we have to grab the read line, right? And kind of the determination that you might make, and I'm just kind of speculating here, maybe you come up with an int and call it points earned, for example, and then you set that equal to converting to an int. And you know what, you can do your math here too. You can multiply it by 5 right here, right? And then store it in the int and then just return points earned. Okay, that's one approach, right? But what's happening here is we are creating a variable. We're storing it in memory, all that. I think what a lot of experienced programmers would do is just skip that whole step, skip that step, and just take this statement, by the way, and put it directly in the return statement, right? They'll just do the read line, the multiplication, and the return, boom, all in one step. Kind of clever, right? Ish, right? If it makes you uncomfortable to do that, you can do this. I guess I'll leave it up to you, which way you want to proceed. Or maybe the better way to do this is I do have a solved version over here. You can just say, or just do this. That way you can compare both of them, whatever. I'm just showing you, right? Either one is okay. All right. All right. Next thing we want to do is the same thing, but now we're going to do it with the yoga classes. So here, I'm just going to follow this pattern I have. I'm going to take the points. I'm going to add to it whatever points I got from the yoga class. And I'm going to call it get yoga, spell it right, classes. Oops. What just happened there? Sometimes I think the IntelliSense is fighting me rather than helping me. Right. Once again, I could use the automatic tool to create this. I'm going to create it manually this time. What's the return type? An int, right? Because we're sending it back to the same thing. This time I'm just creating it manually. And we have to do some calculations here. Now notice how it's trying to force a return statement in. Now we're going to prompt again. So I'm going to start with just kind of like the logical procedure here is I'm just going to throw in the prompt. We're going to grab that information, store it in a variable. Then we're going to start to do some math with it. All right. So here comes the, well, now we're not going to do math at this point. This is just a hard-coded number. Let's go back and look at the description here for just a sec. So, okay, so they're just putting in how many classes they've had, and then we're just going to check the number and issue the points. And you see how there's two tiers here, but I'm also recognizing that there's a third tier that they're missing, which are the ones like less than 5, basically. All right. So I'm going to remember that, like that great example that we did with if statements and else ifs, where like I could either start at an A and work my way down to an F, or I could start at an F and work my way up to an A. Remember that scenario? This is one of those scenarios because we have the three scenarios are less than 6, 6 to 11, or 12 or more, right? So which order are you going to start in? I think what I'm going to start with is the 12 or more because that one makes sense to me. So let's start typing an if statement. So I'm just going to say if, well, thank you very much, Visual Studio. It's not quite the right statement, but I'm going to say if the classes are greater than or equal to 12, right? That's the first scenario. Then I'm going to return 30. Why 30? Because that's what it told me to return. Notice I'm using the approach of not using the curly brackets, which makes me real frankly uncomfortable, but these are really simple statements. I'm going to go with it. All right. The next statement would be if the classes, okay, so okay, if it's greater than or equal to 12, okay, that covers the one scenario. The next scenario is 6 to 11. So how do I express that here? We already know it's not 12. So it's already under 12 if we get to this point. So do I need to check for 11? Do I need to say less than or equal to 11 or greater than or equal to 6? I could do it like that, right? But here I'm going to have you like kind of rethink this. I could also just say if classes are greater than 5, right? Because these are integers, it has to be 6 to 11. 12's already ruled out. See how clever that is? Well, I think it's clever. Maybe you guys don't think it's quite so clever. But I think what would happen with most students who are learning this stuff, that your tendency would be to write a verbose, statement. That would be the tendency. What are we returning in this case? We're returning 10. And then there's the third scenario where it is less than 5. I don't even need to check it. I'm just going to go ahead and return 0. You don't get any points for 5 classes or less. Right. And this is another one of these things here also. I do have 3 different return statements here, but not all of them will operate. Only one of them will operate. Right. So that's get yoga classes. All right. Next one that we're going to do is get aerobics classes. And this time I'm going to be smart and build the function first and then call it. Once again, it'll return an integer and I'm going to call it get aerobics classes, put in my curly brackets and try to keep the auto type from auto typing. I'll start with my prompt. All right. Number of classes you've attended. Could we use the same variable we used in the last class? In fact, let me take a look at this table really quick. 6 to 11, 12 or more. The point values are different, but the logic is identical, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So be smart and just copy all of this, right? And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to switch programs there. We'll still call it classes because they're aerobics classes. That works. It's just a return amount. So more than 12, we're returning 50. So the numbers are 50 and 20. So we're going to just change this to 50 and 20.
And we have to declare like points plus equals get aerobics class too, right? Like we did get yoga classes.
I'm not sure what you mean, Anthony, but if I'm copying the code, I'm copying it exactly.
No, they get rid of the green squiggly line.
Oh, the reason this is underlining is because I have not called it yet. So
Yeah,
up
call
here,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
so up here I have to say points plus equals get aerobics classes, parens, semicolon. All right, and then we're going to have one more we're going to have to do, right?
Mhm.
And that's going to be the nutrition meetings. So I'm going to go the other direction with this one. I'll call it first, right? I'm going to copy that name and manually create this. I'm just going to do that way at the bottom. So it's going to return an int. We're going to use that name. We got our curly brackets. And once again, right, is the procedures are the same. We're going to do the same prompt. Or not the same, a similar prompt, right? Right. We prompt them. Well, this is number of meetings, so I'm using a different variable name. I could call it classes, by the way, but this time I'm calling it meetings. And then I have to look at that chart one more time. So I'm going to go back for a second and look. So nutrition is 1 to 3, gives you 10 points. And then all 4 gives you 40. All right. So then we can kind of follow the same pattern again. I'm going to go from the biggest number to the smallest. So I am dropping this all in at once, right? So if the meetings are greater than or equal to 4, will they ever be greater than? I don't think so, right? So you could argue with me here that this should be equivalent to or double equal sign, right? Then you could argue with me, well, this was a special week and we threw in an extra class and you have no way to account for it. And I should get my Amazon gift card, damn it. Right. That's the other way to look at it. So let's set it up for that. Right. Same scenario here. We're just looking for the meetings being greater than or equal to 1 in this scenario to get 10. And then otherwise, if they go to no meetings, they get no points. Right. So now we've created our functions. We've returned all our values. We've accumulated all those values in the variable called points. Now we have to do our determination of how many cards we get, right? So how do you figure out how many cards? Well, let's look at the description again. 1 card is rewarded for every 50 points. Aha. So right after this little block of code here, could I not say cards equals the number of points divide by 50, right? Will that give us the right answer?
Possibly.
It should. Yep. And then ultimately what we want to do is we want to put the results up on the screen. And instead of just doing a console right line, and of course it breaks my code as I'm typing it, I'm going to create my own function called display results, which will output the stuff for me. All right, so yeah, I have to create that. So let's go way down here. Will display results return anything? No, it's just going to put stuff on the screen. So we can make that a void function. It's not returning a darn thing, right? We'll call it display results. And then inside these curly brackets, we just want to put some information on the screen. For example, we might say something like total points this month, right? You want to show them what their total is. And then, okay, let's think about this. Do we just output the points and then say, hey, this is how many cards you got? What if, and I'm just throwing this out there, what if they didn't earn any points? They just sat on the couch and didn't do a darn thing, you know? Or they had to run from fire, Anthony. Aerobics class was canceled due to fire.
That's a really, really good one.
All right. So here's kind of my thinking. And this is, I'm going to call this part optional, by the way. I'm just going to check. Okay. If you didn't earn any cards, there's no cards, right? If cards is 0, then no gift cards earned, right? So maybe they earned 49 points, but it wasn't enough to get the card. This is where my brain goes, right? They didn't get enough for the card. Well, we better say that, right? Not enough points earned. So cards equals 0, no gift card earned. All right. Is that the right logic? Somebody can test me on that. Should I say if cards less than 50? Is that what I should say?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, that is really what I should say.
If they don't get the 50 points, they won't get the card.
If cards is less than 50, no gift cards earned. That's more logical. All right. Otherwise, right, what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to output a statement that's got all the information in it. And then I'm going to kind of do something a little bit clever here. And at least I think it's clever, right? Once again, you guys might not think it's quite so clever, but that's all right. You don't have to think it's clever. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see this all on one line. But what I put in here, and I threw this in on purpose, by the way, to do an example of a ternary operator, how we might use it for real, right? So here's an example. You have earned, right? So the statement's going to say you have earned cards. Now that's already been calculated, right? So that's just a number coming in. It's a global gift card. You have earned gift cards. Oh, I see. Okay, so here's the why on this. So I'm putting in the string interpolation marks, but I'm doing an if statement. The if statement says if cards is greater than 1, right? Here's the implied if. So if this is true, if they've earned more than 1 card, then we're going to add an S to card. So you've earned 2 cards, right? Else blank. You earned 1 card. Clever, isn't it? Yeah, maybe you guys don't think so. All right. And and what's with the exclamation at the end? I don't know. That's what we decided to put there. That's gonna print to the screen. It has no special meaning. All right, let's run this and see how this works now. Here's a Control S to save. I don't see any red underlines or marks or anything like that, so that's generally a good sign. Let's hit the run button on this. Enter the number of days that 10,000 steps were exceeded. So what are we going to type in here? 4. Enter the number of yoga classes you've attended. Well, I only went to 5. Sorry, only 5. Number of aerobics classes. Well, I did 7 of those. And the number of nutrition meetings. I went to 2 of them. All right. Total points this month, 50. No gift cards earned. What do you think?
Your one if statement, your first if statement in the display results is wrong because it should be checking for if the points are less than 50, not if the cards are less than 50.
Ah, okay. Right. Good catch. Let's flip it. So if we're just flipping the sign.
You should replace cards with points,
Ah,
and then you can put it back the sign back the other way.
good catch, Grayson. All right. So if the points are less than 50, no gift cards earned. Could I also, okay, so maybe my brain was thinking one thing, but I typed a different. The other thing I could check is if cards was less than one, right, which would be zero, basically. Um, that would have worked. But yeah, let's try this. All right, let's try it again. That certainly wasn't the right answer before. I don't remember the numbers I typed in here, but I think I did 4. What did I say? 5, I think 7 and 4. Okay. Is that calculation correct? Seems like it. Let's run it again. I'm going to be an underachiever this time. I only did 1 day of 10,000 steps. I only went to 2 yoga classes, 2 aerobics classes, and 1 nutrition meeting. It seems okay, right? It seems like it's working. Like the one way to really test it to see if it's like hitting the thresholds correctly is to find a 50-point activity. So I can answer like 0 to everything here except for 12 or more aerobics classes. So let's try that. Let's terminate. Let's relaunch. All right, so I'm just going to put in 0, 0, 12, and 0. Okay, so it's right at 50. So this is working. All right, so I think we've proven that it works. All right, and then for the code copiers here, let's just do a walkthrough. So top part of the code, first 2 functions, next 2 functions, and the display. And that's the program, folks. All right, I'm going to cap the video here.